CrossTalks that we've done like we've done in the past, and we'll be jumping back to the panel again. But today we're going to be covering a very, very important topic, and Sister Barb had reached out to me and talked about concerns she had with just things that she has witnessed and sees the danger of from her field of work, and she was just making a suggestion of a topic that could be good to cover. And I said, well, Barb, what we really need is an expert on this that's got some, experience in the field of labor and awareness of it and a passion for it. So why don't you sit down on this Crosstalks with me? And I don't think that's what she was looking for, but she did agree to do that. And so we're going to be covering some very, very important topics today. Talking about the danger of online predators, some of the things that, as parents, you should be aware of for your children, and as children and teenagers, young adults, things that you need to be aware of as well, because we live in a world that is a dangerous place, and we don't have to live in fear, but we have to live in wisdom and awareness. So we're going to cover some great topics here this morning, but just before we begin, why don't we just open with a word of prayer this morning. Lord, we thank you for the opportunity we have to gather here to be able to discuss the things of your word, God. I pray as we cover some very important topics here this morning, that you will give us wisdom as we speak, that you'll anoint the word as we share it here this morning, God. And I pray that you'll help each and every one of us, every parent that's here, every teenager, young adult, God, that you'll help us to develop a godly wisdom to be able to know what is safe, what is not, and to be able to live in accordance to your word. And we thank you for it in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, Barb, before we dive into the more serious topics here, we always kind of start with a softball question here, just to kind of give you a freebie to get going. So, are you a coffee drinker or tea?
Oh, coffee.
No doubt, it's coffee. I already knew the answer to that, but and so the follow-up to that is, if you can go sit down with anyone from the Bible. And I'm going to just put the disclaimer and exclude Jesus, because it's like in Sunday school, the answer to every question is God, right? So we'll exclude Jesus from this, but if you can go sit down and have coffee with anyone from the Bible, who do you sit down and have coffee with and be able to have a conversation?
I would like to, I think it was Deborah, who was like the warrior.
Put the mic right up there.
Yeah, so I think it would be Deborah.
That's a great choice. I don't think we've heard that one yet. I like it. Yeah. All right, very good. So we have so much to cover here this morning, and I want to make sure we have time. So we're going to dive right into it. But Barb, why don't we start with just kind of, can you share a little bit about what you do for work for those that may not be aware, and and why this is such an important topic to you?
I work for Ellsworth Police Department. I'm a communications officer. I've been in this field for 30 years, a little over 30 years. And I see so much hurt. And when you have kids and you see that, you relate that. You know, there's things that I've seen that I put my children's face in some of them. And what would I do, and what I can do to prevent, my boys probably didn't like it, and I was the best helicopter pilot, parent. and every time they mentioned something, they'd be like, "Mom, really?" I'm like, "Yeah, really." And I know there's times that my kids didn't like it, and yeah. I told my kids, I'm like, I am not your friend, I'm your parent. And if there's times that you hate me, it's okay, I'm doing my job then. So, yeah.
That is excellent. I think it's a very good point, because sometimes we fall into that trap of wanting our kids to like us, wanting to be fun, wanting to be, relatable, and all of those things, and that's not what we're called to do.
No.
So, excellent point. And so I think a lot of times on topics like this, we kind of have the mindset of, of almost just ignore it and pretend it doesn't exist, right? We always think it's not going to happen here. It's not going to happen to our family. It's not, and so we just kind of push it away and don't understand the significance of it. And so kind of jumping into our first question there, can you help us understand just how big of a problem this whole concept of online predators, the danger of online stuff that our kids can experience today? Can you help us understand how big of a problem this really is?
With COVID, it increased, and with the first, I think it was Apple phones that come out in 2006, the suicide rate jumped, because people could share things, and it wasn't really what your everyday life is like, when they compared, saying, oh, look at my life, it's not like theirs, but kind of like Facebook is now. But the online dangers, they are so slick. They have everything down. They know what they're doing. They know how to, get at our kids. And some kids, they live between, the real and what's fantasy. And sometimes, if they're young enough, they don't know that difference. So, and there's so many platforms out there. There's gaming platforms, there's e-commerce platforms, there's crowdfunding, so there's many avenues that they can, that predators can reach out to our kids. And it can happen without you knowing it. And there's so much that goes undetected, they might get 10%, but there's still so many more out there. So you gotta, be watching, be looking over your kids' shoulders. And again, with COVID, it's when it increased. And not only in kids, adult scams increased because they were locked up, people were lonely, and scammers knew that.
No, that's an excellent point. And there's, I think it said here, there are like over 330 different platforms. And, we a lot of times are just thinking of, the prominent social media platforms that are out there and being aware of what friends your kids may have on Facebook and things like that. But even children's games that you can download on an iPad or phone or something, a lot of those games have chats in the game itself. And so probably that number is exponentially greater because you can download a children's game that is, a little like animal game or something that's perfectly innocent and seemingly fine, but they can have chats in that game to interact with other people playing the game. And you can't assume that the other people playing that game are also 7-year-old kids.
Right. The playground isn't what it used to be. Yeah. It's a cyber world. It's a cyber, I don't even want to say playground. It's a battleground, there's over 330 platforms or grooming grounds, and between 2019 and 2020, it increased 97% of online exploiting of children. Just in 2023, 36 million tips were submitted to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. 36 million, that is a huge number.
And that's just the ones reported, 36 million.
Yeah, that's just ones reported. And the thing that online predators are after is money, CSAM, which is child sexual abuse material, which I'll just refer to it as CSAM. I don't even like to say, the words. It's just, really bad. And human trafficking. That's another, big thing. And speaking of human trafficking, the United States is the biggest producer of human trafficking and the biggest consumer of the CSAM material. It's just, the United States, America, is the biggest, producer of CSAM. Yeah, it's not good. It's out there. And it's not just out there. It's here.
Yeah.
It's in Ellsworth. It's in Eastbrook. It's in down on the island.
So, you mentioned the battlefield. I like that term because I think that's very accurate. Do you have any specific apps or platforms that you're aware of that are kind of the biggest concern? Maybe some that a parent isn't even, mindful of, that perhaps their kid is already using. Things that we should be aware of.
Well, some of these I didn't even know, but there's WhatsApp, there's Telegram, there's YouTube, there's the live streaming. It could be Marketplace. There's Twix and Switch and Discord. I mean, we probably heard that. I mean, some of us might even use that, and that's where it can start. And it's not only gaming platforms. They have, there's the VR. Probably, Machias has VR. There's the PlayStation, Nintendo stuff. TikTok is a big one.
And a lot of these, the purpose of them is for live interaction, Discord and some of those other platforms, gaming platforms and such out there, to live stream what you're doing. And there's been cases reported of, somebody committing suicide on a live stream. And that's stuff those children that were watching at that moment can never unsee. And let alone other, sexual exploitation type of material. And those platforms will certainly take it down immediately. But if it's a live broadcast, there's no control over what's happening in that moment. And just the language, gestures, things done on that live video, those are all things that your children could potentially be subject to if they're partaking of that type of content.
Yeah, a couple years ago there was a case in Ellsworth where like 5 or 6 people were bullying this one person, and they were enticing this, I would say it's a child, they were probably like 14, 15, to do self-harm. And they were relentless. And this boy, he caved, and he got in his father's safe, and he ended his life because of the bullying. And it was on a live feed. It was, I think, Facebook. And these other children watched it. And when this boy took his own life, some of the kids, they just shut their computer off and went to bed. Didn't even report it. I mean, that was, and that teen, he was just, he's so young, and then I think of my children. Yeah. And I think that could be my child. You got to know what your kids are doing. You got to know what they're doing. Look at their devices, see what they're doing. Yeah. I know with and I'm going to reference to my boys, I had their passwords to their stuff until they were 18.
Yes.
It was my house. I was maybe too strict, but I told them, you're in my house. You're sleeping in my bed. You're breathing my air in my house.
That's good.
So I had their password. I'd go in and check what they were doing.
And then there's so many other things that, a lot of teenagers are communicating via Instagram and, Instagram messaging. And there's vanish mode on Instagram where you can turn that on to where your messages vanish after they're read. These are all things that your kids are well aware of and how they work. And there's, with Apple devices, you've got AirDrop. We had to institute some strict rules at a youth camp several years back because there was the ability for people to drop photos across to everyone's phone that had it on, and there's no trace of that photo being sent. It just shows up there because that's how AirDrop works. You accept it, and now it's on your phone. And there's so many things to be mindful of that you literally cannot limit all of them. There's always another way that somebody is able to gain access, and that's why you have to be so vigilant as a parent. Put those safeguards in place, have those passwords, be aware of the things that your children can access on devices. There's other apps that there's one that looks like a calculator, and it's literally a device for an app for hiding information on your device, where you can hide photos and messages and such, but the app itself looks like a calculator. You can set a custom icon for it and name it something to where it would be completely innocent and unnoticed if someone's just looking through your phone. Just looks like a calculator. But those are the things that are available and out there, and I'm sorry, we all love our children, as we should, but it doesn't mean we have to trust them. Is that all right to say?
Yes.
Because we're all prone to sin. And if you were honest, when you were 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, you could not be trusted either. And you did not have availability to stuff that is out there now. And so we cannot just assume my kid's a good kid. That's not going to happen. I'm sure they're a good kid, but you better put some measures in place to protect them so they stay a good kid.
Exactly, yeah. And they have, not only it's called Calculator Pro, where you can talk to people, and if a parent's looking at their phone, it's like, oh, they got a calculator, they have a calendar.
What a studious child.
Exactly. That's not. And they have another big one is Signal, and the military uses Signal because it's so encrypted, and Signal has a hard time accessing what is, sent across Signal. The military uses it. They're using it, now with what's going on. And area drug dealers use it because it's hard to gain access to it. Yep. And they have, disappearing messages, and some online predators that have a library full of bad stuff. They have to log in like every so many hours, and whoever is in that group, they have to put their passwords in at a certain time, otherwise their entire system or program is completely wiped clean. No trace of it. So I'm sure that kids could do that too if they have stuff on their phone. I'm not sure I know how to do it, but yeah, there's apps out there. And predators know that. Predators go where the kids are. So if something is popular with kids, you're going to find predators there. They know that they have a large target. And that's where they go. They want your kids. They will stop at nothing.
That's true. Kind of along those lines, our third question there, Barb, I think a lot of times we think this would never happen to our kids, right? And, but that's really what every victim thinks. It's not going to happen to me. I can handle this and that sort of thing. So what are some maybe tactics that some of these predators would use to manipulate their victims and cause someone that you would never think would fall, prey to that, to give in?
Well, they create a false profile. So you could have a 50-year-old man and they're pretending to be a 13-year-old girl, and they hit up your son and they start chit-chatting about what they have in common, because that's what predators do. They find something, and you can find out what kids like just by what's on their profile or what they're posting. They'll find that out, and they groom them of what they like. They have something in common. And then it goes to, well, I'm going to send you a picture. And that person who you think is a 13-year-old girl is not a 13-year-old girl, but they will use a 13-year-old girl's picture and send it to the guy, and then the guy will send the 13-year-old girl a picture, and that's where it starts. And there has been cases where, in a matter of minutes, as soon as that, and I'm not just saying guys, but it's mostly guys who send, pictures to others. And as soon as that picture is sent, they turn around and then they start blackmailing. Well, I have this, and if you don't send me more, then I'm going to share it with your family. And here's the other thing. I looked at some people's Facebook pages, and they have, oh, this is my mom, this is my dad, this is my cousin, this is my sister. So they can go on there and see who your relatives are, and they'll say, I'm going to send this to your mom, Deb. I'm going to send this to your dad, Jim. I'm going to send this to your teachers. I'm going to, and that's where they get. And they try to get as much money out of them, and it doesn't matter how much money you send them. They're gonna share it anyhow. We had a case in Ellsworth where this boy fell victim to, someone who said that they were of their age, and as soon as he sent that picture, they wanted $500. And it's been a trend where a lot of mostly boys will end their life because they feel trapped. They see that their whole life is ruined. They don't want their family to find out. They don't want their girlfriend to find out. And it has been increasing where kids will take their life because they feel trapped. They don't know how to get out of this. And that's where you have to have a communication with your child. And this one particular boy he gave $500, but it didn't stop at that. He went and talked with his dad. And his dad reached out to the family and said, look, if you get this, don't open it. And then they came to the police department. It ended up that they didn't send any more money, and that scammer or online predator did send that photo to the family. Now, they didn't open it, and thank goodness he walked away with his life. He was only out $500, but it was a life experience.
And that's a local case right
Yes.
here in Ellsworth.
In Ellsworth, yep.
And so we're not talking about hypothetical situations that are happening in, other places. This is stuff happening right here where we live, where your kids go to school. And I'm sure you could share many other cases. Is there anything else on, more that localized or things to be aware of before we move on?
Yeah, I have a few of them, but online predators have guides on teaching other online predators. They have like how-tos. They have, that they pass out and say, this is what you need to do to get your victim. This is what you need to do to continue it. And it's just not one child. One predator could be working 20, 30 kids at the same time. And they reach out, once they do get your child, they try to take them to a private chat session, and that's what you don't want. You don't want to go from Discord to a private chat session, because that's where it goes really bad. They can give them, I don't know if you ever heard of skins. I'm sure the young ones have. You can get skins. That's a big thing. You can get in-game currency. And sometimes the predators will even give them gift cards or send stuff to their houses, to entice them and to keep them. And here, I was looking up one convicted child predator, and he said when he looked into children, he looked at the dad. He looked at the family structure, and if he thought the dad was a threat, he'd leave the kid alone. Which, dads, be a threat. Be around enough to be a threat.
Yes.
You know.
So good.
And the people who, and this is just my opinion, the people who they don't want masculinity, toxic masculinity, they are probably the same people who are trying to get your kids to chat about things that they shouldn't be chatting about without your knowledge. So be a threat if you have to. Be there.
Very good. How do you think, or what experience have you seen perhaps where the modern advancements in technology, introduction of AI, things of that sort, has changed the way that some of these online predators operate and what they're able to do?
With AI, they can take a picture. They can pull a picture off of your profile. So if you post a picture of your newborn, or you post a picture of your 1-year-old's birthday party, all they have to do is get that, the face, and they can manipulate it and generate it with AI and put it on a body. There's been cases where they go to Disney and they'll take a little video clip of a child. They'll use that video clip and feed it into, I think it's called Nudify, or like an app where you can feed that into, and it will create a little video, a very inappropriate video. And all they have to do is take like the headshot or the face and put it on that image, and you got your CSAM material. And they take that and they share it with others. So your child doesn't have to be physically touched to be a victim and to be traumatized by this.
And so I think it's very evident in all of this that, and I know this is kind of a difficult topic and not maybe not the most pleasant of crosstalks we've had before. We'll do something much more enjoyable next week on tithing, so you can look forward to that. Just remember next week that we could be talking about CSAM. So, however, this is stuff that it's so essential for us to be aware of, because none of us would want our kids or kids in our community to fall victim to this sort of thing. And so we talked a lot about dangers, and I want to make sure with the time we have left, we can talk about some solutions. So maybe let's jump to that a little bit and shift to kind of some of the preventative measures that can be taken. So in a world of all of this evil, all this advanced technology, all of the influences that can impact our kids and avenues that these predators can have access to our kids, what are some things that we as parents can do to protect our kids? And the reality is we live in a very digital world. Yeah. And many careers now require a lot of technology, training and advancement knowledge, and kids that are never allowed to access anything may be behind in some areas in the digital world that we live in now. Mm-hmm. And so what can we do to raise our kids and yet, in the world we live in, yet protect them from all the things we're talking about here?
Well, the Bible says to be vigilant, be on guard. Yes. So you have to be involved. Not only do we pray over our children, we have to be involved. We have to know what they're doing, and we have to talk with them. Make sure your kids know that they can talk to you. Educate yourself. Let your kids know that there's a safe space that you can talk about anything. Nothing is off topic. Yeah. Because if you don't talk to your kids about sex, they're going to go online and they're going to talk to a stranger, and you don't want that to happen. So, and not only to parents, to Sunday school teachers, even friends. Be watching our kids. You cannot be too safe. And if there's siblings, a 5-year-old is going to probably know the same language that your 17-year-old is going to have. So you got to keep that in mind. They might not just be at 5 or 6, years of age language. They're going to, if you have older kids, they're going to know that stuff. So again, you have to be, just make sure you have that open communication and that your child can come to you and talk to you about anything. Maybe we had a code word, so if you went to a sleepover, all you had to do was call and say that silly code word, but that that's going to work. So and if your child gets into a situation, say they go to a party and they find themselves in a difficult situation, make sure your kids know that you will go any hour of the day. I told my guys, if you get into a situation, you call me, I'll come get you. We're not going to talk about it that night. I just want them home safe in my house, and we can talk about it later. Don't get angry at your children. And if your child does tell you something, don't be like, I told you so, you shouldn't have been on there. That's not going to help. Don't tell your kids you can't talk to strangers, because when they're online, they're all friends. They're not strangers. That doesn't apply anymore. They have to, your kids have to know that they can come to you and talk to you about anything, and don't make faces like, I can't believe you did that. Keep calm. Don't be like, oh, I can't believe you did that. That's awful. What if your grandma finds out? You can't respond that way, because they're gonna feed off of how you respond, and you need to keep your head together. Reach out for help.
And there's a lot of things that, as a parent, you can do to help protect them and put safeguards in place so they don't make a mistake. And there's nothing wrong with having limits on technology. There's nothing wrong with, setting clear guidelines for what's allowed, what's not allowed. As Barb mentioned earlier, having passwords to devices, monitoring the games that they play, the people that they're talking with in those games. And you can have parental controls on iPads, phones, whether it's an Android, an Apple, whatever. There's parental controls you can set. We have a MP3 player for Jace, and because he likes to listen to music, and but I can, and he can download some games on it. But I've got that thing so locked down, he can't download anything without parental approval first. If he tries to download something, I get an alert on my phone that says Jace wants to download this game. Do you approve it? And then I can deny it or I can approve it. I've got time limits set on that thing to where he only has a maximum amount he's allowed to use it. I've got it to where it doesn't allow him to open it until like 7 a.m. and that thing shuts off at 7 p.m. Like, there are things that are so restricted on it. I was able to block the internet, and I don't do that because I'm not doing that because I don't trust him.
Right.
I'm doing that because I love him. And so there are measures that you can take to make sure that your children are safe. And a kid should not be going to their bedroom with a phone all night long. There is too much that can be accessed from that device, and too much temptation and curiosity, and the things that they can find and see on that phone, they cannot unsee. And if you love your children, you'll protect them from it.
Right. And like Pastor said, look at your kid's phone. And before you give them a phone, have stipulations. You know, tell them, this is not your phone. I'm lending this to you. That's good. You know, and don't be afraid to take it. You know, if they, you know, go outside of what you said, you know, again, I'm referring back to me, but I had a flip phone. Remember the old flip phones? I called it the Punisher. And so if they didn't follow through, I have gone to US Cellular and I'm like, you need to take it off this one and put it on this one. This is a Punisher and this is what they're going to get for 2 weeks. You know, so do what you have to do. Do random checks. Make sure you have their passwords. You know, you can limit stuff. You can limit the internet and just have it for texting and calling. And I believe that you can also limit who is on your child's contact list. You know, check their Instagram. You know, a kid doesn't, you know, a 9th grader or 10th grader does not need to have 1,000 followers. You know, you just don't, you know, go through that. You know, and okay, who's this person? I don't know. They just sent me a friend request. Delete them. They don't, you know, go through the next one. Who's this person? Oh, well, she sits with me in math class. Okay, so that's okay. You know, and be mindful of who your kids are being influenced by and who they follow. You might want to go through that too, because that's why they call them influencers.
That's so good. And, you know, again, using a personal example, we made the decision that our kids were not going to have a cell phone until we felt old enough and mature enough to have it. And but we did want a way to be able to communicate with Jace if need be, or if he was going to be, you know, at camp or something like that, or, you know, when we were going on vacation, and you know, he's the one that would end up running off, you know, at Disney World or something. And so we had bought an Apple Watch, and you can have a phone number associated with that Apple Watch. And then we can set parental controls on that. And so there are only a handful of contacts on his watch. And he cannot call or receive calls or messages or anything from anybody that's not an approved contact. So it is set up to where it automatically blocks all messages and phone calls unless they're a contact that I have set in an app on my phone that is allowed to contact him. And I can restrict even his contacts to only be able to contact him during certain hours. And so there are a lot of limits that you can set. And I feel like, you know, a parent out there needs to be empowered that that's okay. Just because every other 16-year-old kid has unfettered access to their iPhone does not mean your kid has to have the same. It's okay to set those safeguards. It's okay to say this is what we are going to do. Now, I do believe there are two extremes in parenting. You know, the one extreme of we're never going to have any sort of access to anything, and we're going to keep you protected from everything in the world. And then there's the other extreme of just unfettered access to everything because they're going to figure it out at some point anyways. And I don't think either one of those are good. I think there needs to be balance, and we have to train our kids, and so we have those conversations. You know, Jace, this is why we do this, and this is for your benefit. And we teach and allow a little more as we're training him, but everything is heavily monitored. Whether it's YouTube, if he's, you know, watching YouTube on an iPad, it's in a room where we are. And that's, you know, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. And when you do give your child a cell phone, make sure that everything is set to private. You know, you know, as long as you know, as they get older and you want to give them a little more freedom with that, make sure that everything is set to private, because if it's not set to private, that's what's known as a soft target. And if it's set to private, you know, people aren't going to see that, and that's a hard target. So you want to make sure that your kids are a hard target to get to. So, and turn your location off. I took a few pictures, and I turned the location on in my phone for my camera, and it said the exact address of where that picture was taken. And I know a couple years ago, I didn't realize this but a couple years ago when we were traveling across the country, and I took pictures, and I went to my computer and I looked at Google Maps. Those pictures were pinned at each location across the United States. So I could go there and you could see, okay, this picture was taken at this airport, and it gave the exact location. You know, down to the number. Like I took a picture at work and it tagged it. And if I send that to someone, that location is going to be on that picture. So if you send something to an online predator and it has that geotag on, they're going to see where you live, where you go to school, you know, where your mom or dad worked, where your vacation, what you had for supper. You know, it's all out there.
It's so good. All right, we just have a few minutes left. So, what else would you like to share with everyone here this morning? Is there? I don't want to limit you to one final question here. So, just what else would you like to share with us here today?
Well, I was thinking of the word predator, and Satan is a predator. So I think behind these online predators, they're hiding behind these fake pictures that look, you know, that look nice, you know, that are attractive. And that's what Satan does. He makes sin look beautiful. And he's behind the predators because he's the ultimate predator. You know, when a lion is out looking for prey, they go for the weak. They try to isolate them, you know, the one who might be straying, you know, and that's what Satan does. He tries to isolate his victims. You know, he goes after those who are weak, who might have a low self-esteem or might have a dysfunctional family, you know, or no parental involvement. He knows that. He preys on that. And the last thing is, you don't need to send pictures to anyone. You need to be cautious. Your validation comes from God. You don't need to send a picture of your body to anyone to get validated. Your value comes from God. You don't need to post a picture and hope that you get 500 likes on it. That's not where your value is. So keep that in mind. And what you do put out there, it's out there. You do not ever get that back. So just remember, your value comes from God, and that's where you're validated. You don't need the other stuff to feel validated or valued.
It's so good. And just closing comment, I would just add, you know, if you're here and maybe some of this is brand new to you, and you're thinking, well, I've already allowed all these things for my kids, so it's too late. Well, it's not. And you can make some changes. And I know there's teenagers in here, and I may not be their friend after today, but even if you've allowed things that perhaps you shouldn't have, they're still your kids. They're still in your house. You still have the ability to put up some safeguards and say, you know, I haven't always done things right, and moving forward, this is what we're going to do. And that's okay. And so I empower you parents to make some changes to protect your kids.
And it's just not for parents. If your kids are out of the house, you're probably going to have grandkids. You're going to have relatives in your house. So be mindful. Be watching for that stuff. And even, you know, Sunday school teachers, you know your child's baseline. So if they're not acting right, if they seem, you know, withdrawn, if they seem to be evasive when they have their device and they, you know, close it up right away, check into that, because that's not okay. You need to know your kids' baseline, and then if they are, you know, angry or aggressive, you know, look into that. And if there's, you know, teens or kids that are in this situation now, if you don't feel comfortable talking to your parent, go to a trusted adult. You know, go to someone you trust. This is not the end of the world.
That's good.
You know, if you did that, okay, we all make mistakes. Just remember, talk to someone about it. Go to a trusted adult. You know, even an adult, if you're in that situation, go to someone that you can talk to that can help you out of it. Because there is hope.
Well, I know this wasn't maybe the most enjoyable topic, but did you appreciate this morning? Can we give it up to Sister Barb? I appreciate her and her willingness to participate in this and talk about some very needed things here today. We are out of time for this morning. If you have other questions, I'm sure she wouldn't mind if you have anything specific you'd like to ask, separately from this, or if you would like to come see myself as well, we'd be happy to help you in any way that we can. But that being said, we are going to dismiss from our session this morning. So if you have kids in Sunday school, you can go check them out at this time. We'll have a few moments of transition here in between the services before our worship service begins. But thank you so much. God bless. You're dismissed.